Welcome back, dreamer. I know you love falling asleep to these magical stories, slipping into the hush of Hogwarts, drifting through wandwood memory, and soaring with owls between the stars. So before we begin tonight's journey, would you do me a gentle favor? Just tap that like button softly, like turning the page of a very old, very sleepy book. It helps more wandering minds find their way here, and it tells the story to keep going. Thank you. Now, are you ready to fall into the quiet? Tonight, we'll step beyond the ordinary. First, into the night library of Hogwarts, where the books read you more than you read them. Then, down to Knockturn Alley, where the last true wandmaker still carves spells into silence. From there, we'll slip beneath the Black Lake, following a melody that remembers even what you've forgotten. And finally, we'll lift off on the ancient owling path, a journey not through space, but memory. Each story blends into the next, like breath into dream. But before we let go entirely, I have one impossible question for your sleepy brain to puzzle over. In what obscure corner of the wizarding world can you find a magical plant known to bloom only during lunar eclipses, which once caused an accidental time reversal incident in a 19th century herbology greenhouse? Think it over, or don't. Maybe the answer will arrive in your dreams. Now, pull the blankets closer. Let your breath slow. And let's begin. There is something about fifth year at Hogwarts that stretches the space between heartbeats. The hours grow longer, the candles lower, and even the wind around the tower seems more thoughtful, more hesitant. Perhaps it's the weight of exams, or perhaps the castle knows you a little better by then, your habits, your quiet moods, your name whispered when no one's around. Our story begins with a Ravenclaw named Elric. Not famous, not particularly gifted in transfiguration or charms, but observant in the way that some cats are. He had a habit of walking at night, not boldly, not recklessly, but slowly, as though the castle itself was a sleeping creature whose breath he'd learned to match. He didn't like noise. He didn't like being hurried. But he liked the sound of pages turning. And he loved the secrets that lived between shelves. It was during one of these aimless nighttime walks that he first heard it. Just a whisper. Not even a word. A breath really. Like parchment being folded. Like someone about to speak but thinking better of it. He stopped. The corridor was empty, bathed in the blue silver of moonlight filtered through old stained glass. He stood before the statue of the one-eyed witch, a knobbly thing with a wart on her nose and a perpetual look of complaint. Everyone knew about the hidden passage behind her, well, everyone who read Hogwarts, a history and had older siblings. But this was something else. Elric stepped closer. The whisper came again. Not louder. Just clearer. He could have sworn it said his name. Elric. The breath of it was soft, almost loving. He reached out, not sure what he expected, perhaps the passage would open, revealing Honeyduke's dusty tunnel. But instead, the stone beneath his fingers shifted in a way that wasn't mechanical at all. It felt warm. Like skin after sun. The statue sighed. And then it blinked. He didn't scream. Not really. Just let out a startled sound and stepped back. But the wall was gone. Or rather, it had deepened, become a shadowy arch, lined with flickering candlelight. And within it, shelves. So many shelves. Not dusty. Not cold. But alive with the rustle of pages and the scent of fresh ink and old rain. Elric hesitated. Then stepped forward. The room swallowed sound like a thick quilt. No echo of footsteps, no creak of wood. Just that soft, endless turning of pages. Books lined the walls not just in rows but in spirals and slopes, some floating in midair, some tucked into little alcoves as if sleeping. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. A book fluttered open beside him as he passed, its pages trembling like wings. He caught only a glimpse, a drawing of himself, younger, reading beneath the Ravenclaw Tower window, a single tear tracking down his cheek. He didn't remember crying that day. He didn't remember the book at all. A candle floated past, casting gentle light. In its glow he saw movement, a figure, seated cross-legged near the far corner, reading. Elric paused. The figure was a boy. About his age. Pale. Dressed in Hogwarts robes, but not quite right. The badge on his chest shimmered and faded every few seconds. Ravenclaw. Hufflepuff. Slytherin, then nothing. The boy looked up and smiled. Not with teeth. Just eyes. Elric opened his mouth to speak. The boy shook his head slowly and returned to reading. And then he was gone. No blink. No puff of smoke. Just gone. Some books are too loud to be shelved during the day, whispered a voice from nowhere, or perhaps everywhere. They dream. And they wait. Elric turned, but the room had grown deeper, longer. Shelves stretching impossibly far. Somewhere, a bell tolled. Not the school bell, but one older, made of chime and memory. And in his hand, without knowing how, Elric held a small book. Bound in blue velvet. No title. No spine. He opened it. And read the first line aloud. This is the story of a boy who forgot he had ever dreamed. The book in Elric's hands was warm, not hot, not pulsing, but the warmth of something long held and waiting. The kind of warmth found in a pocket on a winter morning, or the last sliver of sun before dusk. He didn't remember leaving the library. And yet, he woke with the book beneath his pillow. That morning at breakfast, the great hall hummed with its usual rhythm, quills scratching parchment, owls arriving in flurries of feathers and scrolls, enchanted plates replenishing themselves with toast and berries. But Elric sat quieter than usual, eyes distant. He barely touched his food. When someone asked if he was feeling ill, he nodded vaguely, as if agreeing to something he hadn't quite heard. Because what he was really listening to was that whisper. The one the library left in his ear. It hadn't faded. It was still calling. He returned the following night, as if pulled not by feet but by intention. The hall seemed to tilt him gently toward the statue. The one-eyed witch did not speak, but when Elric touched her again, the stone parted without protest. And once more, the hush fell around him like a cloak. Tonight, the library was not as he remembered it. The shelves had rearranged themselves. They curved upward now, like a cathedral of knowledge, a spire of thought rising in spirals of parchment and thread. New candles floated on gentler breezes. And down a narrow aisle between shelves, a new hallway had emerged, lined with silver-framed bookcases and lined in blue silk. The boy was there again. Sitting in the exact same place as before. Reading, cross-legged, as though he'd never moved. Elric moved toward him, slower this time, trying not to blink. "Are you?" he began. The boy held up a hand. Elric stopped. Then, the boy turned a page, closed the book softly, and looked up. His eyes were not one color, but many, shifting like light through stained glass. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the boy said, gently, "Some memories only return when you stop trying to remember them." He stood, book in hand, and stepped backward through a shelf that should not have opened. Gone, again, like breath in winter. Elric turned, and the nearest shelf pulsed. He stepped closer. Each book bore a title not written, but felt. As his fingers passed the spines, emotion stirred, dizziness, laughter, dread. One shelf glowed faintly gold, and from it, a thick green-bound tome nearly fell into his hands. Its title rippled across the cover like water, First Snowfall, Forgotten Farewell. He opened it. It began with a train platform. Familiar. Foggy. There he was, smaller, younger, clutching his father's coat. But in this memory, the man's face was a blur. The sound was muted. A woman was there too, laughing, or crying, he couldn't tell. She leaned down and whispered something to him. And then it skipped. Like a film reel burning. Suddenly, the platform was empty. Elric stood alone, snow falling in thick flakes, wandless and cold. He didn't remember this. He couldn't have remembered this. He snapped the book shut. But the emotion lingered. That hollow feeling in the chest. Not fear. Not sadness. Absence. The shelf before him began to shift. Books slid aside, opening to reveal a hidden compartment, an alcove no larger than a cupboard. Inside was a single book, locked with a silver clasp shaped like an eye. No key in sight. As he leaned in, the clasp blinked and whispered, "You forgot on purpose. Breath with me. Breathe in, slowly, gently. Let your thoughts drift like pages in candlelight. Breathe out, and feel the hush return." Elric stepped back from the eye-shaped clasp, heart echoing in his ears. The books rustled, almost as if in sympathy. He turned, sensing something shift behind him. A ripple in the candlelight. The boy was back. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a door. New. Tall. Lined in bronze and ivy carvings. The boy pointed. Elric understood, "You're meant to open that door next." But the clasp book still pulsed in his hand. Two paths. Two memories. And a choice. The air inside the night library had changed. It was heavier now, tinged with something like thunderclouds pressing behind old parchment. The candles flickered with less certainty, and the hush no longer felt like peace, but pause. Like the library itself was holding its breath. Elric stood between two calls. In one hand, the green-bound book with the silver clasp, its blinking eye a patient sentinel. In the other direction, the boy by the door, waiting. The door itself was carved in ivy, the leaves frozen mid-twist as though once alive. Something about the metalwork shimmered, not with light, but with memory. You could almost hear the wind through branches when you looked too long. But it was the book that called to him first. He took it to a nearby table, one carved of obsidian veined wood that looked grown, not built. When he placed the book down, the table responded, forming a shallow depression for it to rest in, as though it had known the book before. Elric ran his fingers along the clasp. "How do I remember something I chose to forget?" he whispered. The clasp blinked again, and this time, the silver eye released with a slow sigh, like a lock long denied and finally permitted to exhale. The book fell open. No words on the first page. Only a smear of ink and a small, childlike handprint burned faintly into the parchment. Then the second page turned itself. And Elric saw himself, not in Hogwarts, but in a small, stone-walled room lit by low firelight. He sat at a round table with two others, a boy with fox-red hair and a girl whose face was always just beyond focus, like trying to recall a dream an hour after waking. The scene played on, silent at first. The three of them were laughing, he could feel it in the motion, the way shoulders rose and fell with breathless delight. But then the mood shifted. The girl turned away. The red-haired boy stood up too quickly. And the room blurred again. Words bloomed across the next page. "You said you'd never forget us." Then another line, smaller? "So we helped you forget instead." Elric shut the book, breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled, fingertips tingling like static from a spell misfired. He looked toward the boy at the door. Still waiting. Still silent. This time, Elric walked without hesitation. The door's ivy carvings shimmered brighter as he neared, and when he placed his hand against the bronze, He felt it soften, like the skin of an old tree in spring. It opened inward with a sigh. Inside was not a room. It was a corridor of mirrors. Not flat or neat, but warped and rippling like puddles of water suspended in the air. Each one caught a reflection of him, but not quite him. Versions. Variations. 1,000 Elrics in 1,000 stances. Some older. Some younger. One weeping openly. Another laughing manically. Some looked back at him with sorrow. One waved. The boy followed him in, finally speaking. "These are echoes," he said. "Of what?" "Of who you were before you edited yourself." Elric turned. "Why would I do that?" The boy tilted his head. "Because you knew something that hurt too deeply. And Hogwarts has old magic. It let you trade." "For what?" The boy stepped closer. His voice was kind. "For peace. For sleep. For quiet." Elric looked around at the ghost mirrors. "Did I give up real people?" The boy hesitated. "They were as real as your memory allows." He reached out and touched one of the rippling mirrors. It stilled. A scene sharpened into focus. 3 children running through a corridor, slipping on stone, laughing as a prefect shouted after them. Elric saw himself trip, get caught by the girl with the not quite clear face. She grinned, victorious. That grin was burned into something inside him. A piece that hadn't surfaced in years. The mirror began to hum. The boy turned away. Not all reflections can be reabsorbed. Some will stay ghosts. That is the cost. The corridor darkened slightly, and from far down its hall, a low vibration began, like a cello string pulled taut, ready to break. "You're not the first to come here," the boy whispered. "I'm not." No, his voice was almost too soft now. "There are students who sleepwalk into the library every year. They forget by day. Remember by night." Elric looked at the final mirror. It did not ripple. It showed only himself, his current self, but staring directly back, wide-eyed, fully aware. That version spoke. "You're almost out of time." The vibration grew. Books somewhere behind the corridor began to rattle. The door began to close, inch by inch, slow but inevitable. Elric turned toward the boy. "Who are you?" The boy smiled faintly, almost regretfully. "I'm the page you never turned." The candlelight behind him flared. Then blinked out. And the door closed. The mirror before Elric shattered. Not into glass, but into ash. A gust of wind, impossible in this sealed corridor, swept through, scattering the ash like petals. He stood there, alone now. The silence thick as sleep. Then a page fluttered past his feet. He bent to retrieve it. It read, Hogsmeade. Knockturn Alley. A wand carved from water memory. The ink shimmered. The letters rearranged. Next door opens in Knockturn. There are places in the wizarding world that feel like secrets even when you stand inside them. Rooms that hold their breath, shop fronts that blink when you pass, corners where the magic isn't bright or showy but old, older than spells, older than even the name a magic itself. Knockturn Alley was such a place. It curled off from Diagon like a shadow from flame, narrow and bending in that way old paths do, not built by architects but by need. Wizards passed through it quickly, coat collars turned up, eyes cast down. Most didn't stop. But there was one shop where time moved more slowly. The windows were so clouded with dust and spellglass that the inside seemed forever twilight, even in mid-morning. A single word curved in faded gold above the crooked door, Thistledown. Inside, it smelled of cedar, ash, river stone, and something more elusive, something like memory steeped in bark. This was the last wandmaker in Knockturn Alley. And the apprentice had just arrived. His name was Merrin. 16, gangly, quiet, not by design, but because he had learned that words were often too small for what he felt. He'd been sent by letter, a vague apprenticeship offer sealed with a wax stamp he didn't recognize. There had been no interview. Just the instructions to arrive by first frost. Bring gloves. Come alone. He'd nearly turned back twice. But now, standing inside, gloves tucked into his belt, Merrin was enveloped in the hush of something not abandoned, but waiting. The shop was longer than it looked from the street. Shelves stretched high, almost dizzying in their reach. Boxes rested at angles, some glowing faintly, others humming low notes only felt in the ribs. Labels handwritten in a looping scrawl, faded with time, elder, willow, blackthorn, silver lime. At the far end of the room stood a workbench so gnarled and worn it looked more like driftwood than furniture. Behind it, the wandmaker. He was tall, lean, dressed in robes that shimmered faintly like oil on water. Black, but not entirely. His beard was streaked with ash gray, his fingers inked at the edges as though he dipped them into runes and never quite washed them clean. "You're late," the wandmaker said without looking up from the wand he was carving. His voice was rasping, like pages turning too fast. "It's not yet midday," Merrin replied. The wandmaker looked up then. His eyes were the color of burnt amber. "You're right," he said. "But the wood's been waiting longer." The first lesson was silence. Not enforced, not cruel, but practiced. Wand-making, the wandmaker explained, was a form of listening. Each core or dragon heartstring, unicorn hair, phoenix feather, and stranger things still, had a voice. Each wood had memory. The wand was not built. It was coaxed. Invited. "Magic doesn't like to be commanded," he said as they sorted through the unmarked cores. "It responds better to curiosity." Merrin learned the grains of yew from the warmth of rowan. He memorized the feel of hornbeam, the scent of vinewood in the rain. Days passed in slow rhythm. The wandmaker never explained the carvings etched into the walls, nor the symbols stitched into his sleeves. He only raised a brow when Merrin asked. But every evening, they lit the hearth together, using no spell. Just flint and patience. One night, as snow dusted the windows and the wind howled through the alley like a wolf too proud to beg, the wandmaker placed a wand on the workbench. Merrin approached. The wood was pale, smooth as bone. The core shimmered through a hairline crack, something silvery, like a thread of liquid starlight. "This one," the wandmaker said, "is broken." Merrin reached toward it. "Don't." He froze. The wandmaker studied him with those ember eyes. "This wand remembers pain. You can feel it if you're careless." Merrin stepped back. The wandmaker nodded. "Good. You're learning." Late that night, unable to sleep, Merrin wandered the shelves. There was one section he'd been warned not to touch, cordoned off with a single charm, nothing more than a whisper of static in the air. He stepped through it. Not out of defiance. Just need. The shelves here were stranger. Wand boxes longer, thinner, labeled in a language he didn't know. One box sat askew, its lid half open. Drawn forward, he peeked inside. The wand inside was unlike any he'd seen. Dark wood, almost black, veined with soft blue light that pulsed slowly, like breath. He reached toward it. The wand quivered. Merrin stopped. The wand hummed, not with warning, but recognition. It called to something inside him he didn't know he had. Then, behind him, the wandmaker spoke. "That one has lake water in its grain. Carved from driftwood pulled from the edge of the black. D shingles of Knockturn Alley in thick, heavy silence. By morning, it softened the jagged corners of buildings and muffled even the echo of owl wings overhead. In the wand shop, time seemed to press inward, folding gently around the workbench like a cocoon. Merrin had begun dreaming in wood grain. Not metaphorically. When he slept, his dreams were lined in fibers and rings, each loop carrying a memory he didn't recognize. He would wake with the scent of fresh shavings in his nose, the sound of carving tools echoing faintly through his thoughts. The wandmaker said nothing about this. He only watched Merrin more closely, as if waiting for something to surface. The second lesson was failure. "You will carve a wand," the wandmaker said one morning, setting a block of pale ash before him. "From bark to tip. Alone." Merrin looked at the block. It was smooth, unassuming, innocent, even. He carved for hours. The knife slipped. The grain cracked. Once, the wood let out a faint cry, a sound not meant for ears but for nerves, just a flicker at the edge of sense. When he finally finished, his hands were raw and his breath shallow. The wand was wrong. Lopsided. Lifeless. It didn't hum. It didn't breathe. When he lifted it, it snapped in two. The wandmaker only nodded, as if he had expected this. "The wand didn't scream," he said quietly. "That's good. That means it died peacefully." Merrin buried the broken wand behind the shop, beneath a stretch of ivy that grew even in snow. That night, he heard it whispering from the earth. Not angry. Just lonely. The next morning, the bell above the shop door rang for the first time in weeks. A customer. She stepped inside like a shadow falling across a table. Her cloak was dark, but the air around her shimmered slightly, as if she carried some invisible storm with her. Her eyes were so light they looked silver, and they never blinked. She moved with absolute silence through the shop, not looking at Merrin, not acknowledging the wandmaker, until she paused by a shelf of wand boxes bound in iron clasps. She picked one. "Try it," the wandmaker said, stepping out from behind the workbench. The woman nodded once and held it in her hand. Nothing happened. Another. Still nothing. She tried 4. 5. Each time, silence. Finally, she turned to Merrin. "You," she said. Her voice was low, rough with something like smoke. "You choose one." He hesitated, then moved past her, letting his fingers trail across the shelves. He didn't think. He just listened. One wand warmed slightly beneath his hand. Just a flicker. He took it and turned, holding it out. She reached. Touched. A wind rose through the shop, no source, no spell. The ivy on the walls rustled. Candles flared. And the wand let out a sound, a low note, like a cello weeping. She nodded. "This will do." The wandmaker said nothing until she had gone. Then he placed a hand on the workbench, fingers splayed. "You felt it," he said softly. Merrin nodded. "You're not just carving wood anymore. You're carving meaning." The snow began to melt in the days that followed, but Merrin remained restless. The lakewood wand haunted him. He visited it again one evening, when the wandmaker had retired upstairs. It was still pulsing, slow and steady. A heartbeat. This time, when he touched it, the wand flared blue at the seams, like starlight caught in tree bark. A memory surged up from it, not his own. The scent of water. Deep and cold. The song of something vast moving below the surface. A girl's voice, echoing from beneath, laughing. Then, gone. The wand fell silent again. Merrin staggered back, breath sharp in his throat. He'd seen the Black Lake in visions before, in books, in dreams, but never like this. Not like memory. When he told the wandmaker the next morning, the old man only nodded, expression unreadable. "There's more in you than you've claimed," he said. "And more in that wand than water." He paused, then added softly, "Some magic doesn't come from learning. It comes from remembering." Later that week, another stranger arrived. An old wizard, wrapped in moth-eaten velvet, eyes clouded with cataract fog. He carried no wand. He needed one. As he stepped into the shop, he whispered, "I've come for what was once mine." Merrin offered him box after box, but nothing took. The man looked around, smiling gently. "Ah. You've moved it." "Moved what?" Merrin glanced toward the shelf with the Lakewood wand. But it was no longer there. The wandmaker stood still, silent, his face as unreadable as stone. The old man turned toward Merrin. "It's calling again. That means it's close." The wandmaker's voice was quiet as frost. "You don't own it anymore." The man smiled faintly. "Then perhaps it owns me." That night, Merrin found the Lakewood wand beneath his pillow. He hadn't placed it there. It was warm. Waiting. The days that followed blurred like the surface of stirred ink. The shop settled back into its rhythm, quiet but thick with meaning, like a room that had recently held a conversation too important to forget. The old man never returned. His name was never spoken. But the wand he sought, carved from lake driftwood and kelpie hair, remained nestled in Merrin's thoughts, as though he'd breathed it in. The wandmaker said nothing about its appearance beneath Merrin's pillow. He only watched more closely, and each day seemed to weigh heavier on him, as if each wand he carved cost more than it used to. Then, one cold morning, Merrin woke to silence that wasn't right. The fire hadn't been lit. The shop hadn't been dusted. No kettle steamed in the corner. He went downstairs and found the wandmaker at the workbench, standing before a wand box that Merrin didn't recognize. It was smaller than most, wrapped in a thin ribbon of charmed iron. Rusted, but still pulsing faintly with ancient warding magic. The wandmaker didn't look up when Merrin entered. "She left this one behind," he said. "Who?" Merrin asked. The wandmaker slowly turned the box. The ribbon fell away. Inside was a wand unlike anything Merrin had seen. Not because of its form, it was simple, unadorned, no carvings or gleaming grain. But because it had been split down the center and repaired. Poorly. A jagged crack ran from hilt to tip, stitched with what looked like vines turned to metal. Its magic felt torn. Not malevolent. Just unfinished. "She was my first apprentice," the wandmaker murmured. "Decades ago. Brilliant. Wild. She carved her own wand and poured everything into it. Too much. What happened?" "She disappeared," said the wand told her to find something. To go where water forgets. Merrin felt the pull even before the words left the wandmaker's mouth. The Black Lake. That night, a storm moved through Knockturn Alley like a story half forgotten. Rain lashed the windows sideways. The ivy on the walls moaned. And somewhere deep in the shelves, wand boxes rattled, one by one, like teeth chattering in their sleep. Merrin couldn't rest. He paced the shop. The wandmaker hadn't come down all evening. Shadows danced longer than they should. The air smelled of iron and rain. Then the Lakewood wand called again. Not with words, but with pressure. Like a hand placed gently on his chest, urging him forward. He found it where it always waited, in the quietest part of the shop. This time, when he touched it, the vision came not as flicker but as flood. He was underwater. Not drowning, moving. Swift and sure. Moonlight filtered down through the rippling ceiling above. He passed strange forms, merpeople watching with narrowed eyes, long strands of kelp whispering like curtains in a forgotten house. The wand guided him deeper. There, resting among stones and silt, was a wooden chest bound in silver twine. He reached for it. But just as his fingers touched the lid, the scene cracked, shattered into darkness. Merrin jerked awake on the floor. The wand in his hand glowed pale blue, humming low. The shop was still, but the front door was ajar. Outside, the storm had passed. But the street was flooded. Just enough to reflect the sky. He stood in the doorway, watching the reflections twist and pull. Then the voice came from behind him. "You've seen it too." It was the wandmaker. He was older somehow in that moment. Frailer. Like he'd been holding something back for years and finally let it go. "That one doesn't belong here anymore," he said. "It's meant to return." Merrin turned. Return where? To the lake. To the memory buried beneath it. He looked toward the street. Then back to the wand, still warm in his palm. That night, he packed in silence. The wandmaker handed him a sealed letter. "For her," he said. "If she still lives." Merrin nodded. "Be careful," the old man said, voice like fading wind. "The lake remembers more than it forgives." Merrin left at dawn, footsteps echoing through the wet stone of Knockturn Alley, the wand tucked safely at his side. And in the quiet shop, the wandmaker stood before the broken wand on the bench and whispered a name no one had spoken in years. The wand hummed once. Then was still. The journey northward took days. By the time Merrin reached the edge of the forbidden forest, spring was beginning to stir under the frost. Crocus buds whispered through the soil. The wind carried the first scent of thawed earth. And Hogwarts, its towers quiet in the early morning, rose like memory from the mist. But he didn't approach the castle. Not yet. He followed the old footpaths, the ones students rarely used. The ones half swallowed by ivy and moss, where creatures paused mid-step as if remembering old friends. The wand pulled gently in his pocket, not urgently, not brightly, but steadily. As if it knew exactly where to go. He reached the black lake by dusk. It was mirror still, reflecting the bruised purple of the sky, scattered clouds, and the first prickling of stars. The shoreline curved around him like an old embrace. Somewhere far across the water, a bird cried out once, then was silent. Merrin knelt by the shore. The wand pulsed faintly. He drew it out and laid it gently across his knees. It was time. The water was colder than he expected. Even with spells warming his skin, the lake bit through like a truth you've avoided too long. He let himself drift downward, breath held, fingers gripping the wand. Below, the world changed. Darkness folded around him, velvet soft and endless. Shapes stirred in the distance. Not menacing, just curious. Merpeople in the shadows. Glowing jellyfish floating like dreams with no anchor. A current brushed his cheek, and he followed. The wand led him deeper. And then, there it was. Half buried in stone, held fast by lakeweed and silt, the chest from his vision. He reached for it. This time, the vision didn't break. The chest opened. Inside, wrapped in faded velvet and bound with runes older than English, lay a wand that looked nearly identical to the one he carried, same driftwood grain, same pale shimmer. But this one was cracked. Split nearly in two, held together only by strands of kelpie hair still alive, still glowing faintly. He touched it. And memory surged. He saw her. The girl from the wandmaker's story. His first apprentice. She was younger than he expected, wild-eyed, brilliant, swimming through the lake as though she belonged there more than land. She had carved the wand not as a tool, but as a question. A question she had flung into the lake to be answered. But the answer had been too large. Too old. The wand had tried to hold it. And broken. She hadn't died. She had become part of the memory that lived beneath the lake. Waiting. Merrin surfaced with the wand in hand, the lakewood wand tucked at his side. And on the shore, or impossibly, stood the girl. Or what remained of her. Not a ghost. Not a shade. A thought made flesh. Her hair drifted in waterless air, her robes moving like mist. You brought it back, she said, voice soft and echoing with the lake's own rhythm. He nodded. It was never mine, she added. Just a vessel. But it remembered me. And you. Merrin held out the broken wand. She didn't take it. Instead, she stepped closer, placed her hand on his chest, just above his heart. It's yours now, she whispered. But carve with care. The lake is listening. When Merrin returned to Knockturn Alley, days later, the wandmaker was waiting. He didn't ask what had happened. He only looked into Merrin's eyes and saw what he needed to see. You heard it, he said quietly. Yes, Merrin replied. And you listened? Merrin nodded. The old man placed a hand on his shoulder. Then your apprenticeship is done. Merrin blinked. Just like that. Not just like that, the wandmaker smiled. You went to the lake. You came back. He turned toward the workbench. But the work, oh, Merrin, the work never ends. Later that night, Merrin sat alone in the shop. The lakewood wand hummed quietly beside him, no longer restless. In his hand, a fresh piece of willow waited. Not to be shaped, but to be understood. And outside, beyond the frost-dimmed glass, an owl called softly across the sky. Even before the dreams began, she loved the lake. Her name was Corwin, a fourth-year Hufflepuff with a talent for vanishing. Not through spells or invisibility cloaks, but in the quiet way some people simply aren't noticed. She sat at the edges of rooms, always listening, always gentle. Professors liked her. Students forgot her. But the lake remembered. She would sit at its shore for hours after classes, wrapped in her oversized cloak, books unopened beside her. The surface was always so still. Perfectly still. Like glass that forgot how to shatter. It wasn't just the quiet she loved. It was the sense that beneath all that stillness, something was watching. Not in a fearful way. Not even in a curious way. Just present. Waiting. The first dream came at the end of October. She floated beneath the surface of the lake, hair drifting like seaweed, the water warm as breath. Above her, the sky rippled with moonlight. Below, darkness. Then a sound. A melody. Not music exactly. Just a tone, rising and falling. Slow as breath. As though the lake itself was exhaling. She woke with the rhythm still in her bones. That day, in herbology, she hummed it under her breath while pruning flutterleaf vines. Professor Sprout paused, cocking her head. Odd tune, that. I don't know where it's from, Corwin replied truthfully. Professor Sprout smiled vaguely and moved on. But Corwin couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, she returned to the lake's edge. She waited. Nothing. No song. No ripple. But when she stood to leave, the water sighed, just once, and a single lily pad drifted in from the middle of the lake, silent and strange. There was no lily on it. Only a feather. Black and glistening. Dry, though it had floated all that distance. She began visiting every night. Sometimes, she brought parchment and scribbled the song from her dreams. Other times, she brought a candle, watching how the flame bent in windless air. The lake always answered in small ways, bubbles that rose in perfect patterns, shadows that rippled without source, once even the scent of mint, sharp and out of season. She told no one. Not because it was a secret, but because she knew it would be ruined by names and explanations. There were some things too delicate for words. Still, something inside her wanted to go deeper. Literally. She began researching underwater breathing methods. Potions. Spells. Gillyweed was the obvious answer. In the library's restricted section, she found an old copy of Waterways of the Magical World, with a chapter on freshwater enchantments and magical aquatic flora. She learned the best time to enter the Black Lake, when the moon was a crescent and the sky was quiet and no dreams had broken. That night, she slipped into the lake. The gillyweed tasted like bitter spinach and fire. Her throat closed, then opened. Gills bloomed behind her ears. Her hands webbed slightly. She dove. The water welcomed her like a womb. It wasn't cold. Not anymore. Not here. She moved with surprising ease, hair streaming behind her like the tail of a comet. Lights flickered in the deep, not reflections, not magic. Eyes, perhaps. Or bioluminescent algae in patterns that almost resembled words. Then, she heard it. The melody. Not in her ears, but her bones. It came from below. She swam down. Past sunken stones, past rusted chains and drifting robes. Past statues half buried in moss. The lake floor rose to meet her, then dropped again, an unseen trench. From within it, something moved. Not large. Not monstrous. Small. Swift. It circled once, fast enough to stir the water into spirals. Then it paused. A face emerged. Childlike. Not human. Mer. A merchild with wide eyes and silver skin, hair braided in strands of kelp, watched her with an expression she couldn't read. The song had stopped. Corwin hovered, uncertain. The merchild raised one finger. Pointed at her. Then touched its own lips. Silence. Then it smiled. And vanished into the trench. Corwin returned to the surface slowly, heart pounding, lungs aching with the knowledge that breath would never feel quite the same again. As she climbed onto the shore, she saw something beside her boots. A stone. Smooth. Flat. And carved with a symbol she'd never seen before. It was shaped like an eye. But instead of a pupil, it held a spiral. She didn't sleep that night. She only hummed. The stone stayed beneath her pillow. Corwin didn't mean for it to. She simply couldn't bear to leave it on the desk, exposed to the noise and mess of daily life. Its presence was too quiet, too precise, like a secret handed to her in trust. And every night, as she drifted into sleep, her fingertips brushed its smooth, cold surface, grounding her in something both older and deeper than dreams. By day, the world returned in full volume, e-classes, laughter, the clatter of silverware in the great hall. Her friends noticed a shift in her, though none could name it. "You're quieter than usual," someone said at breakfast. She only smiled. She wasn't quieter. She was just listening more carefully. That evening, she returned to the lake. The moon was waning now, just a sliver of silver in the sky. The wind had stilled entirely, and the water mirrored everything: sky, stars, Corwin herself. She brought Gillyweed again. This time, the descent was easier. She swam through the remembered pathways, following the scent of stone and the shimmer of distant eyes. The trench waited, still and bottomless. She hovered above it. And the merchild rose to meet her once more. It wasn't alone. This time, 3 others followed, taller, leaner, with solemn eyes and hair like vines. They circled slowly, never too close. The merchild darted forward and offered something, a string of small silver shells, looped on braided waterweed. Corwin hesitated, then took it. As her fingers closed around the strand, the melody returned, not sung, but felt, humming through the shells like breath caught in coral. One of the older merfolk spoke then, though no words formed in. Etched with lines that shimmered faintly blue. Inside was stillness. She entered. The walls pulsed softly, like breath held and released. In the center, a pedestal. Upon it, a wand. Not carved. Not grown. Formed. Stone and water and something else, memory itself, shaped into a slender form. She didn't touch it. The merfolk watched. This belonged to the first dreamer, came the voice, ancient now, and slow. She who listened. She who returned. Corwin stepped forward, the melody curling around her like kelp. Then, without thinking, she spoke her name, not aloud, but in the same silent way the merfolk did. The pedestal responded. The wand shimmered. And an image bloomed in the air before her. A young woman, older than Corwin, but not by much, stood at the shore of the lake, alone. Her face was open, curious. She held a wand very much like the one on the pedestal. She stepped into the water. Behind her, the forest pulsed. The sky folded into dusk. She vanished beneath the surface. The image wavered. Another scene, the same woman, deeper now, surrounded by merfolk, holding the same silver shell necklace. Then, finally, she stood in the lake's depths, arm raised. Calling something. Welcoming it. The vision faded. Corwin stepped back, chest tight with feeling too large for her ribs. The wand on the pedestal pulsed once. Not for her. But for someone who had remembered. The merfolk bowed their heads. And gently, slowly, they began to sing. The melody was unlike anything Corwin had heard before, and not the dream song, not the hum in the shells. This was a song of invitation. A song of recognition. She wept underwater, the salt lost in the lake's endless hush. When she returned to the surface, the night had turned foggy. The castle lights flickered faintly in the distance. On the shore, nestled against her cloak, was a small slip of parchment. It was soaked through, yet the ink held. Return when the moon forgets its name. There was no signature. But somehow, she knew who had left it. The note lived in her pocket now. Soft, water-stained, curled at the edges like a pressed petal, it carried more weight than parchment should. Return when the moon forgets its name. Corwin read it again and again, not looking for meaning in the words, but in the space between them. The way the loops of ink swam and stilled. The hush they held. She watched the moon each night. Waxing. Waning. Slipping through its own phases like someone turning in sleep. And then, at last, it vanished entirely. The new moon. The sky blank and velvet. No name. That was the night she returned. No gillyweed this time. No tools. No spellbook hidden under her cloak. Only herself, and the necklace of silver shells draped quietly over her wrist. She stepped into the lake without fear. The water accepted her like a returning thought. The descent this time was different. Not faster. Not slower. Just known. She followed the path the merfolk had shown her, but they did not appear. The trench welcomed her without watchers, and when she passed into the soft-lit dome, it opened not as a room, but as a memory. The walls dissolved into vision. She stood in a forest, stars pressed like snowflakes between branches. A creature moved among the trees, enormous, slow, humming with power. Its shape was fluid. Antlers formed and vanished. Its hooves became waves. Its eyes were made of sky. This was not the lake. And yet, it was the lake. Before it was a lake. Before water claimed it. The creature walked until it came to rest in a hollow, and when it laid down, the earth sighed, and the first rains began to fall. Corwin gasped. The lake had been alive once. Not just with creatures, but as one. The vision shifted. She now floated above a chasm, deeper than any trench, and within it, she saw flickers of every dream she'd ever forgotten. Tiny versions of herself reading under candlelight, singing lullabies no one else remembered, touching hands she had since let go. All of them drifted like plankton, glowing faintly. Then, at the very bottom, a light. Not bright. Just true. She dove. No longer in her body, not exactly, only in intent. In essence. The light met her halfway. It wasn't a creature. Not a person. It was memory itself. Coiled, breathing. Waiting. It whispered a question. Do you wish to keep forgetting? She opened her heart, not her mouth. And the answer rose, no. The light entered her, not violently, not all at once. Gently. Like water finding its place in a vessel shape to hold it. She awoke on the shore. Dawn. The lake glimmered with early light, thin mist rising. The silver shell necklace had changed. The shells were now etched with the symbol from the stone, the eye with a spiral. And in her hand rested a single droplet of water. Not wet. Not cold. But solid. Shimmering. As she turned it, it revealed a reflection not of herself, but of stars. Then owls. Hundreds of them. Flying in formation, wing beat silent against the night sky. She blinked. The droplet melted into her skin. A song hummed behind her ribs. And from the trees, one owl emerged. White. Watchful. It dipped its head. Turned. And flew north. Corwin followed. The owl didn't fly fast. Its wings barely disturbed the air as it glided between trees, through low mist and starlit hollows. Corwin followed on foot, her breath slow, her body moving as if in a trance. Each step felt chosen not by her, but by something larger. Something old. The forest thinned as the owl led her onward. She passed through clearings where time felt strange, it was slower, quieter. In one, she saw fireflies drifting in loops that spelled runes she didn't understand. In another, a tree hummed when she walked past, as though remembering a song she hadn't sung yet. Finally, they reached the edge of a cliff. Below, the black lake stretched far and wide, moonless but glowing faintly from within, its center pulsing with a soft, golden shimmer. The owl landed on a crooked branch and turned its head, waiting. Corwin stepped to the edge. There was no fear. Just silence. And then, music. But not from the lake. From the sky. Dozens, no, hundreds, of owls emerged from the clouds above. Silent wings stretched wide. They flew in a great spiral, forming a circle in the sky. One by one, they peeled off, drifting downward, wings slicing through air with the grace of wind and memory. Each owl carried a thread of light. And where the threads touched, the sky opened. A seam. A gate. A passage. Not to another place. But another moment. Corwin felt the hum behind her ribs deepen. She stepped into the light. She found herself standing at the edge of the black lake again. But it was different. The water was calmer. Warmer. The moon shone full and unbroken. And beside her stood a woman. Older. Kind-eyed. Familiar in ways Corwin couldn't place. "You called," the woman said. "Did I?" You remembered. They walked together along the shoreline. The woman hummed. It was the same song. The lake was a question, she said softly. The owls, answers. You followed the right ones. Corwin looked up. The sky was full of wings, now frozen in place, like constellations. Is this real? She asked. The woman smiled. Does it matter? Corwin shook her head. Not really. When she awoke, she was back in her dormitory bed. The shell still hung around her wrist. The stone lay under her pillow. And inside her mind, the lake was still singing. But softer now. Like a lullaby ending. She walked to the shore that afternoon. The lake looked ordinary. But when she placed a hand against the water, it felt her. And pulsed once. Not calling. Not waiting. Just knowing. Corwin returned often. Not to dive. Not to speak. Just to sit. To listen. And every now and then, when the world grew too loud, the necklace would warm. The stone would hum. And the memory would rise, not as a story, but as a feeling. Of water. Of quiet. Of wonder that needed no explanation. And overhead, on certain nights, owls still passed in slow, wide spirals. Carrying light. And song. It begins on the quietest of nights. Not the kind weighed down by heavy clouds or wrapped in howling wind, but the other kind, the hush that arrives when even the stars seem to pause their twinkling. The kind of night when snowflakes hold still in the air before deciding to fall. When chimneys forget to smoke. When time folds its hands and listens. That's when the owls take flight. All of them. From every rookery, rafters, tower, and hollow. From the peaks of Hogwarts to the dim woodlands beyond Hogsmeade, from the steeples of wizarding towns to the forgotten ruins where only moss remembers names, they rise. They do not hoot. They do not cry. They gather. And those who are quiet enough to notice, children who wake without knowing why, witches with dreams still clinging to their fingers, lonely souls with open windows, feel a pull deep in the chest. Not fear. Not even longing. Just curiosity. Among them was a child named Ada. Ada was not quite a student yet, not quite an anything. 11 years old, soft-voiced, born with a heart that beat in odd rhythms. Her magic, too, had odd timings. It showed up late or early, sometimes not at all. Once it mended a bird's wing while she was crying. Another time it turned her shadow silver for a week. She lived with her grandfather in a cottage carved into a hillside. Books lined the walls. Tea always simmered. And owls, oh, there were always owls nearby. One in particular, a great barn owl with frayed feathers, watched her from a branch just outside her window. Every night. Every winter. It never came inside. It never blinked. She named it Lumen. And on the night the owls rose, Lumen did too. Ada sat bolt upright in bed. No sound had woken her. Just movement. She slipped from her sheets and padded to the window. Outside, the sky was alive with wings. Dozens of owls. No, more. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Moving not in chaos, but formation. Like threads in a tapestry being drawn upward. Lumen turned its head, slow and silent, and looked at her. Then flew. Not away, but up. Then north. Ada didn't think. She moved. A cloak. Boots. Wand, though she wasn't sure it worked properly. Out the door. Into the hush. She stepped outside and the cold greeted her not as enemy, but companion. The sky shimmered with feathers. And then, there it was. Her grandfather's broom, propped against the wall. Not fancy, not fast, but faithful. She climbed aboard and followed. The flight was like no other. No wind bit at her face. No branches reached to catch her. The owls paved a path, their bodies glowing faintly, not with spell light, but memory. Each wing beat left a shimmer in its wake. Together, they formed a ribbon across the sky, a road that stretched between stars. Below, the world unfurled in sleeping silence, darkened meadows, frozen ponds, the distant twinkle of chimneys far away. Time bent around her. Minutes became hours. Or maybe hours became moments. Lumen circled back, close now. Close enough that she saw the glint in his eyes, not reflection, but recognition. She had been here before. Not in this body. Not in this life. But somewhere in the shape of her soul, this path was known. And the owls remembered. They passed over valleys filled with clouds, where no land showed below. They passed through forests where the trees bent upward, limbs like arms reaching to follow. They flew past a lake, not Black Lake, but similar, where water held not reflection, but stars, as though the sky had melted into it. And then the path dipped. The owls descended. So did Ada. They came to rest in a wide meadow on a high cliff, windless and blanketed in frost. At its center, a tree. Not tall, not large, but luminous. Its bark glowed pale blue, its leaves silver even in winter. The owls landed in its branches. Ada stepped from her broom. The meadow was still. The stars above twinkled once, then held. And from the hollow of the tree, a soft voice spoke. You followed the owling path. The voice was neither young nor old. Not male, not female. It came from within the tree, not echoing out but whispering inward, as though it reached for the part of Ada that still remembered lullabies before language. You followed the owling path, it said again, and the bark shimmered like moonlit water. Ada didn't reply. She didn't need to. The voice had already moved on, its attention drifting like fog into the next moment. The owls rustled in the tree's silver branches, feathers glowing faintly. Then one dropped. Not an owl, but a feather. Larger than any she'd seen. Soft gray-edged in starlight. It hovered before her, then slowly fell to the frost-covered grass. When she picked it up, the meadow changed. The frost melted. The tree swayed in a wind that hadn't existed a second before. And a path opened beyond it, a trail of luminous stones curving into a narrow valley. She stepped forward. The first village appeared like a memory halfway remembered, chimneys puffing slow, dreamlike smoke, windows lit from within with golden firelight, doors slightly ajar as if left open for someone who'd just stepped outside and never returned. There were no people. Only traces. A tea kettle steaming quietly on a windowsill. A chessboard mid-game. Boot prints in snow that hadn't fallen. Ada walked slowly. The owls watched from rooftops. At the edge of the square, a stall stood covered in moss, its sign faded into green swirls. On its surface sat three objects, a smooth stone, a candle that never flickered, and a folded piece of paper. She opened it. It said, "The second step is not a step at all." She took the stone. And the candle vanished. The path pulled her forward again. This time, into a deeper cleft in the hills. Another village. Older. Built not with planks and brick, but with curved stones and archways worn smooth by centuries of hands. Here, time moved slower. Snowflakes hovered mid-air, never quite touching the ground. A cat blinked at her from beneath a table, and did not blink again. She found a bell on a windowsill. It rang when she touched it, though no sound came. Instead, a scent. Cinnamon, and something sharper. Winter apples. Dried lavender. A memory bloomed, her grandmother's hands tying ribbons around potions, whispering nonsense words that made her feel safe. Below the bell, carved into the stone. Memory is not kept. It is followed. She walked on. The third village was not a village. Just a field. Wide. Windswept. Stars brighter than anywhere else she'd been. In the center stood a figure. Not human. Not owl. Draped in robes stitched from cloud, face hidden, they stood perfectly still. In their hands, a map. When Ada reached for it, the figure spoke, not aloud, but in the language of branches against windows, of breath in winter scarves. You do not need the map to go forward. Only to know you are not lost. The figure stepped aside. Behind them, a stone gate, ancient, crumbling, overgrown. Beyond it, sky. Not open sky, but sky folded inward, like a dome turned inside out. A place where stars watched, not sparkled. The feather in her hand pulsed once, then vanished. The gate opened, and Ada stepped through. Time did not pass in the usual way from that moment on. She walked among flickers, scenes unfolding in silence on either side of the path. Children learning spells long forgotten. Witches brewing tea with starlight and nettles. A boy sitting by a pond, whispering to a fish that glowed from within. Each step a story. Each breath a memory not hers, but meant for her. The owls flew above, circling now. Not in formation, but in reverence. And when she reached the edge of the path, she saw it. The cliff. The wind. The single owl perched atop a spire of stone, holding in its beak a key made of sky. Not silver. Not gold. But cloudlight and dusk. It dropped the key. Ada caught it. And the air held still. From below, the gate waited. Locked. Not by spell, but by readiness. She stepped forward, key in hand. And the door whispered open. The gate opened not with sound, but with stillness. A stillness so complete, it quieted even her heartbeat. On the other side was not a room, nor a tunnel, but a cliff suspended in the middle of the sky. There was no ground, no sky above, just layers of soft color swirling endlessly, like the inside of a glass orb filled with magic and breath. Lavender, silver, and faint gold moved like smoke. The key in her hand shimmered faintly. Not cold. Not metal. It seemed made of cloud and possibility. Ada stepped forward. The owls were waiting. Hundreds of them now. Perched on stone spires that jutted up from the void, their wings folded but alert, heads all turned toward her. The ground beneath her feet became a path, narrow, soft as moss. With each step, the space around her shifted, revealing pieces of herself, images drawn not from memory, but from the hidden folds of her thoughts. She saw herself at 4 years old, trying to charm a teacup to sing lullabies. Failing. Laughing anyway. She saw herself hiding in the cupboard after her parents left, humming to keep the walls company. She saw her first glimmer of real, raw magic when she mended a bird's wing not with a spell, but with a desire for it not to suffer. Each step deepened the hush. Each memory softened her. And then, at the edge, stood a final gate. This one made not of stone or sky, but of feathers. Feathers stitched together with threads of starlight and frost. There was no lock. Only a question. It hung in the air, not spoken, not written, but deeply understood. Do you wish to know who you are beneath the name? Ada closed her eyes. Yes. The key dissolved in her hand. The gate parted. Inside was silence. And then, a shape. Not a person. Not a creature. A presence. It hovered in the center of the space, made of light and echo, of breath and reflection. It shimmered with every color she'd ever dreamed and every sound she'd ever forgotten. And it knew her. Without introduction. Without explanation. It was not a judge. Not a teacher. It was simply witness. She stepped forward. And the presence lowered something into her hands. A stone. Flat. Warm. Marked with a single symbol. The same spiral-eyed marking she had seen before, on the shell, on the necklace, in the lake. She turned it over. On the back, words began to etch themselves as if by quill tip made of wind. This is the dream you carry. Let it guide. Let it soften. The owls called once, a single, rising note that echoed outward into the quiet. And the presence began to fade. Not away. Just inward. Settling into her. Becoming part of her. Ada opened her eyes. And the world returned. She stood once more in the high meadow where her journey had begun. The tree stood tall. Silent. Lumen rested on her shoulder. No words were needed. The owls began to rise. Wings stretching, feathers glowing, they LRS, no longer swirling in patterns, began to fade into the indigo sky. The path she had followed, paved in feathers and memory, slowly unspooled behind her, dissolving as though it had never existed in the world of ordinary things. But it had. And it would again. The owling path was not a place. It was a permission. A turning inward. A listening. When she finally rose and mounted her broom, the flight back felt different. Not because of distance. Or speed. But because the land beneath her now carried shape and story. Valleys that once looked like shadows now glimmered with quiet memory. Villages, invisible on maps, now flickered gently through the folds of hills, their windows aglow, their silence purposeful. Somewhere far below, she glimpsed the black lake. Still. Dark. But not empty. It held her reflection differently now, less like a surface, more like an invitation. And in the sky, the first faint blush of sunrise touched the edge of the world. When she returned to her grandfather's cottage, he was waiting. Not with questions. Not with worry. Just with 2 mugs of tea and a knowing smile that said, "I once flew too." They sat together on the porch, the steam curling upward into the pale morning. Ada reached into her cloak and placed the spiral stone between them. Her grandfather looked down, nodded once, and said nothing. But she felt it then, how the story she carried was not hers alone. How others had walked paths that shimmered with dreamlight and feathers, long before names were passed down. She had followed the owls. Now she would guide them too. That night, as she drifted towards sleep, Lumen returned to the windowsill. He did not hoot. Just watched. Then spread his wings. And from his feathers, a single spiral-shaped light floated gently downward, landing beside her pillow. A whisper of the path she had walked. A promise of paths yet to come. And the lullaby of sky and wind and memory began once more. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Waiting. And far above, in the fold between stars, the owls gathered again. Ready. For the next dreamer to listen. And now, you've wandered the shelves of the night library, touched the grain of memory carved into wandwood in Knockturn Alley, drifted beneath the black lake where songs sleep in silence, and flown along the ancient owling path that bends between stars and time. Each story a breath. Each breath a page. Each page a place you can return to whenever the waking world grows too loud. Perhaps your heart still hums with the echo of gillyweed dreams, or your fingers remember the weight of a feather made from skylight. Maybe you've left a part of yourself in the quiet corners of Hogwarts where books whisper and doors open only at night. That's the gift of soft magic, it never truly ends. It rests with you now. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Let the spiral of story draw you inward. And if sleep finds you before the first lines return, that's all right. That's what stories like these are for. And when you're ready to wander again, the first story will still be waiting. The Night Library never locks its door. If you've enjoyed tonight's drift through magical memories, there's so much more waiting for you. This is just one chapter in an ever-growing collection of sleep stories, each one carefully whispered to guide you deeper into the dream world. On my channel, you'll find a whole series told from the perspective of Harry Potter's diary, a soft, intimate retelling of the wizarding world through quiet ink, gentle thoughts, and secret reflections. It's a place where forgotten pages remember, where ghosts of parchment speak in hushed tones, and where each story folds softly into the next. So when you wake, or the next time you're ready to dream again, wander over to the full series. It's waiting. Quietly. Just like always. You can start wherever you like, but the diary remembers everything. And if this journey brought you peace, let me know by liking the video or leaving a quiet symbol in the comments, just a little whisper, so I know you're out there. Sweet dreams, always. Oh, you're still awake? I thought you might be. Some stories only open when the world is especially quiet, when the last log has fallen in the fireplace, and the owls have stopped mid-flight to listen. This is one of those stories. It's not loud. It doesn't begin with spells or jewels or mystery letters carried by storm-swept owls. No, it begins in a room most students never remember waking up in. And with a breeze that shouldn't have been there at all. Juniper Blythe was a third-year Gryffindor with soft hands and a tendency to overthink simple spells. She was known for getting along with ghosts, not for dueling trophies. Her essays were long, her wand work careful, her eyes always slightly lost in thought. People liked her, but never noticed her. And maybe that's why the room found her. She woke in the hour before dawn. That thin sliver of time where dreams blur into the pale shape of furniture and breath turns to frost in the air. Something had stirred the curtains beside her bed. The windows didn't usually open this late in winter. But tonight, there was a breeze. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, her breath visible in the dimness. One of the dormitory windows had moved. It wasn't supposed to be there. The architecture of Gryffindor Tower was stubborn. It didn't make new windows. The old stone didn't shift. And yet, there it was. Oval-shaped. Frost-edged. A narrow brass handle catching a sliver of moonlight. But what truly pulled Juniper from her bed was not the window itself. It was the view. Because beyond the glass wasn't the snowy sprawl of the Hogwarts grounds. It was a hallway she had never seen before. Juniper approached slowly, barefoot, her nightrobe trailing behind her like the end of a thought. The corridor outside the window was long and gently sloped, lit by floating candles. The walls were lined in books, but not the dry kind. These books glowed softly, as if remembering stories more than simply storing them. The air beyond shimmered faintly, like dreamlight off water. She hesitated. Then, with the kind of bravery Gryffindors are known for, not the loud kind, but the curious kind, she placed her hands on the windowsill and climbed through. The moment her feet touched the floor, the window closed behind her with a whisper. Gone. The corridor curved gently, like a path carved not by builders but by wandering footsteps. At its end stood a single door. Oak. Rounded. With a brass plaque just above the knob. The room with the wandering window. Juniper tilted her head. Something inside her recognized the name, but not from books. It rang with the same warmth as an old tune hummed by someone you barely remember, but who once loved you deeply. She touched the knob. It turned easily. And the door opened. The room inside was not large. But it felt endless. The ceiling arched high above, disappearing into a soft haze of candlelight and stars painted on midnight blue plaster. The walls rearranged themselves when she blinked, one moment, lined in bookshelves, the next, laid in quilts and old portraits that whispered to each other when she passed. A fireplace glowed with a steady blue flame that gave off no heat, only comfort. There was a table at the center. Upon it, a quill, ink, and an open journal. Juniper stepped closer. The journal was already full of writing. Not neat, but familiar. She read the first few lines, and her breath caught. They were her words. Not written recently, but thoughts she'd once had. Things she never told anyone. Sometimes I wonder if my shadow is louder than my voice. When I cast lumos in the dark, it always feels like I'm asking for company, not just light. Juniper touched the page. The ink shimmered. And the chair behind her scooted back gently. Inviting. She Saturday. There was no sense of time here. No ticking clocks. No sun to rise. Just the soft crackle of the fire. And the feeling that the room was breathing. Slowly, deeply, alongside her. She turned the page. More entries. Written in different styles. Some in looping script. Others sharp and quick. All of them carried pieces of her, not memories exactly, but echoes. The kind of thoughts that flutter through your head just before sleep. Or just after heartbreak. One name repeated through the entries. A boy. But every time his name appeared, it had been scribbled out. She turned the page again. This one was blank, except for a single line. You'll remember him when the room is ready. Juniper's heart fluttered. She stood and began to explore. A narrow hallway led off from the main room. Small doorways branched off to either side, like branches from a quiet tree. Each room was different. In one, she found a music box playing a tune she used to hum as a child, one she thought she had made up. The box had her initials carved into the bottom. In another, a mirror showed her not as she was, but as she could be. Taller, sure-footed, her wand steady in hand. Confident not from pride, but from having remembered who she was meant to be. In the last room, a window opened onto a memory. She was standing in the library, years ago, just after arriving at Hogwarts. Alone. Lost. A boy had approached and offered her a quill. They had laughed about nothing at all. His face was blurred. But the warmth in her chest remained. The quill. The same one that now rested on the table in the main room. She walked back. Sat down again. And this time, the fire crackled a little louder. She looked around once more. The room had changed again. The walls now lined with shelves of items she didn't recall ever owning, but each sparked a feeling. A seashell. A string of beads. A torn page from a children's book. The room whispered. You are more than the spells you cast. You are the things you remember when you feel forgotten. Juniper closed her eyes. And breathed in. The fire had changed. Not brighter. Not hotter. Just deeper. It now burned with layers, threads of lavender, silver, and faint rose gold coiling upward like ribboned smoke. When Juniper looked too long at the flames, she began to see shapes. Not quite images. More like impressions. Of places she might have been. Or never left. The journal still waited before her, pages fluttering in a wind that didn't stir her hair. She lifted the quill. It fit her hand as though it had been carved for it, familiar, warm, alive in a quiet way. She turned to the next blank page. And wrote. There was a boy. I don't remember his face. But he made the quiet feel safe. The ink shimmered gold. And the room replied. Not with words. With motion. A door appeared. Not a hallway door, not like the others. This one was carved into the side of the fireplace, hidden until now. Its surface was marked with tiny runes that moved like ants. Crawling. Rearranging. Pausing only when she stepped close. Juniper placed a hand on the knob. The door opened inward. A staircase spiraled down, lit by nothing. But she wasn't afraid. The room wouldn't hurt her. She descended. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. And at the bottom, a room waited. Circular. Small. Lit by dozens of floating candles that cast their light not outward, but inward, as if the walls themselves were remembering. Photographs hovered in the air. But not photographs like the ones in the castle's galleries. These moved only when she wasn't watching. Each one captured a piece of her she'd lost. Her first night in the great hall, wide-eyed, feeling invisible. Her first successful spell, a hovering feather, her smile trembling. A stolen moment beneath the Ravenclaw tower where she'd once gone to cry, even though she wasn't in that house. Each image flickered as she approached, then gently faded. Except one. One photo glowed brighter. It showed her and the boy. They were sitting together on a bench beneath the astronomy tower, mid-laughter. Her hand on his. Not romantic. Not performative. Just there. A gesture of grounding. The name still didn't come. But this time, the boy's face almost sharpened. Brown hair. Kind eyes. A freckle near his lip. It hurt, in that aching beautiful way. She reached out to touch the photo. And it dissolved. But the warmth remained. When she climbed back up the stairs, the journal had written a line on its own. His name will come when your heart remembers more than your mind. The quill hovered just above the parchment. Waiting. She sat down again. Wrote. The room is remembering me. The ink pulsed softly. A soft breeze stirred the air. And then, a knock. Soft. From the main door, the one she'd entered through. She stood slowly. Opened it. And there he was. Not fully there. Not solid. But real enough. The boy from the photographs. Translucent. A little flickering at the edges, like candlelight caught in wind. He looked at her with that smile, and said quietly, I was starting to worry you wouldn't come back. Juniper stepped into the doorway, heart blooming. I forgot you. He nodded. Not sad. Just knowing. That's what the room's for. They stood in the threshold for a long time. Then he held out his hand. And she took it. Together, they stepped back inside. The room shifted again, walls unfolding, ceiling widening. It became a constellation chamber. Stars drifted across the darkened dome above. Each one pulsed to the rhythm of something just behind thought. The boy led her to a chair by the fire. They sat, side by side. Juniper opened the journal. The next page was already filled in the boy's handwriting. We used to meet here in dreams. You stopped coming. The room waited. Juniper turned to him. Why did I stop? He looked into the fire. Because growing up can make you believe you imagined magic like this. She was quiet for a long time. Then wrote, I believe again. The room hummed softly. The walls glowed. And the return door appeared. The return door shimmered faintly in the far wall of the room, newly revealed behind a curtain of flickering tapestries. It wasn't grand or glowing. It was small, wooden, curved at the top like a cottage gate. A silver handle, polished by use. The kind of door that didn't shout departure, but whispered now that you remember. Juniper didn't move right away. Neither did the boy. They sat in the hush, letting the fire tell its last quiet stories through the blue and lavender flames. Shadows of old selves danced gently along the walls, flickers of a younger Juniper playing with floating candles, sketching spells in midair, laughing at nothing. The boy turned toward her. His eyes weren't sad, but soft with something even quieter. You don't have to go, he said. I think I do. He nodded. That's the right answer. She rose slowly and walked to the door. It wasn't locked. But it didn't open, not yet. A tiny brass plate above the handle shimmered to life. To pass through, you must choose what to carry. The journal sat on the desk behind her. Still open. Still half-written. The spiral-marked stone waited in her robe pocket, warm with memory. But it was the quill, soft, starlight-tipped, humming faintly, that called to her hand. She lifted it. And the door unlatched. The boy stood behind her now. I don't remember your name, she whispered. He smiled. That's all right. The room will remember for both of us. Then, gently, he placed his hand over hers on the doorknob. And together, they turned it. The room didn't vanish. It folded. Like a story returning to its first page. And she stepped through. The morning light in Gryffindor Tower was soft and grey. Juniper sat upright in bed, breath caught in her chest, not startled, but stilled. Like someone listening for the last line of a lullaby. The other girls slept soundly. The frost on the window shimmered. She looked. The strange oval window was gone. Only the normal, square-cut stone frame remained, showing the castle grounds as they always were, quiet, snow-lined, undisturbed. Had it been a dream? She turned. And there, resting on her bedside table, was the quill. Still warm. Still soft. And beneath it, a slip of parchment. Just 6 words. When the stars change, return again. For the rest of that day, Juniper walked a little slower. Looked a little longer at shadows. Smiled softly at corridors she used to ignore. Something in her had opened. Not loudly, but completely. And late that night, when she lit her wand and watched the glow pool into her palm, she whispered, "Lumos." Not as a spell, but as a promise. And the light stayed a little longer than it should have. As if the room was still listening. That was the story of the room with the wandering window. It might visit you too, one night, quietly, kindly, when your heart feels just a little too forgotten and your memories want to breathe. All it asks in return is that you write something down when you wake. Even just your name. So it remembers. And the door can find you again. And just like that, our stories come to rest. You've walked the halls of the night library where books breathe in candlelight. You've watched wandlore unfold in the hush of Knockturn Alley. You've swum deep into Black Lake dreams and flown along the spiral of stars on the owling path. And if you stayed with me even now, perhaps you stepped into the room with the wandering window, too. Most wizards don't make it this far. So if you're still here, truly still here, thank you. That's magic, right there. If this journey helped you drift off, or made your night just a little quieter, do me a soft favor, and drop a like on the video. It helps this dream reach more quiet wanderers like you. And if you want more, there is more. I have a whole world of whispered stories on the channel, including a dreamy, diary-style series told from the heart of Harry Potter's own journal. Each one is a doorway waiting to be opened. You can start anywhere. The rooms remember. The owls are still circling. And somewhere, a book just turned its first page. Sleep well, traveler. Until next time.